Okay, wonderful. It's 2 p.m. I promise I will slow down and talk slowly because you're probably digesting whatever food that you had at lunch. Hopefully some vegetarian options to lower your carbon. Yes, big nod of head. Well done. Welcome to the INSEAD second Climate Run I Learned. Is that right? Very good. Well done to the student organizers and to Hoffman to actually make this happen. Well done. And thank you for all of you to come here and really talk about this very important topic. In a minute, I'm going to introduce our panelists who actually made their effort to come on campus. I'm super happy. And the good news is they're all based around here in Paris. So the carbon footprint is actually quite low. They all walked here, I promise. It was a nice walk in this nice weather. What we're going to do is I often start a little bit of a background, right? So we heard a lot about climate change. We heard a lot about what things are going on, and we heard a lot about tech. What I'll do is I'll take about 5 to 10 minutes to show you some data, and then just try to summarize some of the key issues we're facing, and also get to some things that we talk in the class is, can you cut through the data and try to understand and make connections across the data and see what does that mean? And some of the things that you may be fully aware of from social media, they might be true. They might also argue for your second thought on some of these key issues. Once we set it up, I will pose sort of 3 questions for us to discuss during this session, right? We talk about the role of big tech or technology in general in climate change. We're basically saying, okay, first of all, we heard so much about the big tech in different lights, good or bad. And now we have the panelists from those firms. They have to justify their existence. Now, what they're trying to do is first they're going to answer the question, what are they doing around climate change, right? What's their commitment? What's their path to carbon neutrality or maybe even carbon negative? And how is that feasible? But then if you pay a lot of attention to this topic, you would understand there's actually scope beyond what the firm are doing themselves, because the technology solutions they're producing has a broader impact around scope 2 and scope 3, both on the manufacturing side, supply chain side, and on the ecosystem side. So we're going to sort of move into that arena to say, okay, yes, you solved your own carbon challenge. How do we actually pay attention to a broader challenge that we're facing? And then lastly, we wanted to turn it on the other side of the tech for good, is to say, okay, beyond your firms yourself, how can technology in general participate into this broader conversation? What's technology's role in helping us, right, solving this current issue? Technology has been super helpful in the past in increasing productivities. What can we do in this new era when we face these new challenges? And from that, we'll give 10 minutes, we'll keep it rather hard, from each of the panelists to speak a little bit about their company and what they're doing, their commitment, their past. And then we'll open it up for questions. In the meantime, please do think about the questions you have for them, and then we'll also collect the questions for online as well. So for online participant, hello everyone, please post in the Q&A through the Q&A button. We will be able to see a lot of these, and I'll be moderating those conversations both with in person and through the webinar. And that will last for quite a while, so we'll try to get as many questions from you as possible. And then we'll leave a little bit towards the end to talk, if you wanted to talk more specifically about each of the company. So let's start, right? Let's start with a bigger picture. Well, what are we talking about right now? I'm fully aware I have my colleagues here, and they are all economists, so correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm citing your data wrongly. But very interesting, if you look at globally, what we actually see is in the past a huge increase in GDP numbers. So basically, as humanity, we're doing really well. By different economic factors, for example, life expectancy, life quality, all of these has been increasing over the years. Even if you look at the productivity itself, the output per hour, globally, you actually see the increase if you follow the time series, and this is where we are right now. And you can see the productivity around the globe. So these are all good news, right? But one thing as sort of a byproduct, or the economist colleague will call this externality, is we start to pay attention, or we didn't pay enough attention to a lot of things that's happening around us. For example, the climate change, right? So with a lot of industrial production, you emit carbon. A big part of that energy is you actually, as humanity, we excavate a lot of the carbon underground and burn them to get heat, to get energy, etc. And those get re-entered into the atmosphere. And another piece is the natural resource depletion, where during the COVID time, we see a lot of supply chain disruptions, and now we see the rare mineral shortage, et cetera, et cetera. So we started to pay attention to those externalities. I just wanted to sort of begin this session by a 2-minute, right? Well, this is a silent video, which is counter to what we see right now. We usually like music and big splash, but just for 2 minutes, right? We'll ask for your patience as we go through this and see what has been the overall global climate, like global temperature over the past 100 some years. So red obviously is getting to more of a higher temperature or extreme temperature. I heard a lot of sighs from the audience. It was like, we know it's bad. We didn't kind of know it's this bad. Academically, majority of the meteorologists or whether scientists will fall into the camp to think about this is a big issue, although there's still debate ongoing whether this falls into the overall sort of cyclical cycle of the global temperature. But hopefully these kind of data solidifies at least one thing that cannot be argued, which is the human impact on the global carbon emission and temperature rise. Right, so this picture basically shows the global temperature curve and the carbon emissions, or the global sort of carbon concentration within the atmosphere. And you can see this significant increase in the recent years, and partly because of the use of fossil fuel, etc. As we all sort of learned in business school, a lot of things we learned it linearly. We basically say, okay, so you burn something, and then you have the temperature rise, and we just need to burn less, and then that will go away. But I actually come from a natural science background. I was a biologist before I was a business school professor. We kind of look at the system differently, right? So on the one hand, you have the output. Basically, you have a lot of carbon emission. On the other side, you need to look at, if you basically view nature as a robust buffering system that can actually take a lot of this input and digest it, you need to think about how does nature actually absorb carbon and actually fix the problem for us. And how do they do it? Through forest, right? A lot of greeneries. And what happens with the Industrial Revolution, with a lot of the industrialized land, with the human residential lands, and also with agriculture, is we increasingly deforest, right? So we basically cut down the forest in order to gain land. And that has been the trend over the years. We basically see a huge decrease in sort of in the forest area. This is showing one of the major, sort of one of the 4 major forestries, which is the Amazonia. And we do see a little bit of tip in the recent years because of the efforts to stop or slow down deforestation. But that did have a triggering effect around the globe, right? If you think about it, what happens is we increasingly have more carbon emission into the globe. We have less forest to actually recycle or fix it back or absorb the carbon, take it out from the atmosphere. And also forest plays a bigger role in the global climate, also in terms of the water cycle, right? Water cycle also regulates temperature. And with that is gone the other way around, we also have now extreme weather that's coming in. So we're trying to ask you, or to think about this, is not a linear correlation necessarily directly, but in addition to this linear correlation, there's also a system effect. When you deforest, when you actually, through the deforestation, it changes the water cycle. Now you cause the water scarcity around the world, and you cause the biodiversity loss, right? So for example, now recently we heard a whole bunch of stories around this, right? Now we're fearing if in a few years we're going to be out of bananas to eat, right? Globally, corn are narrowed down to about 6 different species of production, right? That means it's very vulnerable to certain new diseases rising. That's what happened to the banana species, right? It happened early on in the 80s, and now it's happening again. So what I encourage you to do is, as we're talking about business challenges, we also need to think systematically how these different phenomena are connected together, right? The global temperature is connected to deforestation, is connected to the water cycle, is connected to biodiversity in general. And now let's come to the industry side. We're basically saying, okay, if that is all happening, who is doing the most damage? I was trying to cut a better picture to actually highlight the damage you guys have done, but there isn't such a data, at least directly available for me. But we basically can see energy is a huge part of it. And then this tech industry probably falls into this sort of other area. And then agriculture stands as second. And then the tech industry also probably will come a little bit in the industry sector as well. If you look globally, the top emitters are those energy companies, especially in the petroleum sector. Now, what we're basically saying, there are efforts done. There were efforts done in the past years, right? We talk about the effort to stop or slow down deforestation. There are other efforts done here as well. For example, Europe is one of sort of leading forces to slow down the greenhouse emission, and then has been rather successful in the past year, with the exception of a few sectors. However, with this bigger trends of increase, now this is the scenario we're talking about, right? So the doomsday scenario versus a meaningful action towards a carbon neutrality or carbon reduction. This becomes increasingly difficult. How do you actually energize all these different sectors to act upon these challenges in order to reduce, sort of break this trajectory and then slow down or reduce our carbon emission and start carbon fixing in order to get to this better case scenario that we don't get to the doomsday? Now, before I start to talk about tech sector specifically, just to leave you think even broader about this system view, right? So we talk about the environmental side, we talk about deforestation, temperature, and water, natural resources. There's also social challenges. And Mark is actually leading our Stone Institute for Inequality. And we basically observe, right? So there is deepening inequality within sort of developing economies. And also, if you either by a measure by income or by wealth. I'll leave you to sort of read the chart itself, but what does it mean, especially in the technology context? Is if you think about access, that's the first level of technology. The inequality plays a huge role in it. For example, when we think about mobile money, in the developed world, we're talking about apps. But if you move into African continent, if you moved into India, a lot of time you actually don't have smartphone or 5G or high connectivity, then you rely on to SMS or other text-based way to manage mobile money or digital money. And therefore, the access to different technology, right, based on this inequality will create another barrier for technology to actually play a role to reduce the inequality. And then another part is, how do we actually think about the outcome of this, right? If on the one hand, you have a difference in access, on the other hand, people will have different access to the outcome that's coming out of the technology advancement, right? So that's the phenomenon we now know as sort of the winner takes all, or the rich get richer, because if you have capital, if you have wealth and income, then you can have access to higher technology. And that higher technology may actually lead to higher productivity. And then that inequality gap deepens over time. So those are sort of the broader challenges. Let me just take 2 minutes to go through this to think about what is specifically happening to the tech industry. This is one famous chart. And actually, when I walk around, people often talk about this and say, look how much evil they're doing. If you're using AI modeling. If you're filling the data and try to run AI modeling for some predictions, you actually have a higher carbon emission compared to many of the other things, right? A car use or an average American life carbon emission over the year. So let me make this a little bit more interactive. How do you make connection between this chart versus the chart that I showed you before, that energy sector produce the majority of the emission, not the tech sector? How do you make sense of those? I mean, by this measure, they should be top one, right? If you combine Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft, and everybody, Apple, they should be off the chart. So it could be about how it's scattered sort of across the value chain, the supply chain itself, and what else? Part of my interpretation is what, yeah. So this is basically the carbon emission benchmark to the rest, right? So they're basically saying that training an AI algorithm is a lot higher. Yeah, they probably take an average. I mean, this is done by MIT, right? So it's legit data. Yeah. How do we explain this within the sector? Did you try to? Yeah.
I would say two things. First of all, I think that the AI model that they're using is
it's an old one. It's a really powerful one. The neural network is.
I think this is going to come up in the conversation later. You'll see that most of that is happening on in data centers that run on renewable energy, right? So although there's a lot of electricity that's consumed, we don't have a large carbon footprint because we're actually running on renewable energy in the first place. And I'll come back and talk about that in a bit.
Right. And there's also just academically, when you look at, there's also a base problem, right? So these are the single use. If you time the base, it becomes a different challenge, right? So there are multiple things. So what I encourage you to do as we're in business school, when you look at these kind of data, you need to cut behind it and say, okay, how do you actually connect the different charts, right? If you actually tally the global data center carbon emission, it's only around like 1% of the global carbon emission. And many of the companies are actually paying a lot more attention to this. I'm going to skip all of these. I'm basically trying to make them all renewable, right? So if you look at the sentiment within the high tech sector, because of visibility and because of the employee sentiment, a lot of them are actually looking at different ways to clean up even their current operations. So this is sort of the transition slide to introduce some of our speakers. But this is sort of what the companies are trying to do, at least with their internal carbon emission, right? So this is Microsoft's carbon path to net zero. Basically, it's largely based on reduction, and then there are a whole bunch of carbon removal and carbon fixation and transition to clean energy as well. And this sort of Ericsson had a similar roadmap. So what have I done so far is basically trying to summarize a little bit of what's happening. The broader picture is we are in a bit of a climate crisis. Right? Partly because of the increase in productivity, partly because of the carbon emission challenge. And within that, we're basically saying the different sectors play different roles, and probably the largest sector is energy, and tech certainly plays an important role in itself, but it may not be as sort of what we hear, as big as what we hear. Nonetheless, they still need to commit to think about a different carbon future. So what we're going to hear from the panelists is to talk about their commitment, their path to that carbon neutrality or maybe carbon negative. And we're going to ask in the discussion is how do we actually think about reducing this broadly, right? If you look at other industry, for example, if you look at energy, if you look at agricultural sectors, there's a huge job to be done in terms of how do you reduce the carbon emission in those other sectors and what's the role for technology in those. So with that, let me introduce the three panelists. So if you can stand up and say hi to everyone, that'd be great. Morat, you want to say a few words?
Hi, can you hear me? I think my mic, yes. Okay, perfect. So I'm Murad. So I'm
Yeah.
so I'm
Just
from
say hi and then,
yeah, I'm from Accenture. I was an MBA 21D, so I was just here like last year. I'm very happy to be back. Yeah. Do you want me to continue the presentation?
Let me introduce
Yes.
everyone and then we'll call you back up. Yes.
So hello, I'm Anissa Bellini. I'm part of Dasa System. I'm happy to be here as well.
Welcome back.
Yes.
Hi, and I'm Andrew. I was here as an MBA in 1992. Most of you weren't alive yet. Very happy to be back. Looking forward to picking up on some of these discussions.
Excellent. Thank you all for coming, and we'll give the stage to Morat. You have 10 minutes max
Okay.
to go through your slides.
I try to
Thank
keep
you.
it short. So yeah, so what I wanted to do today, and like in line what we presented, is what Accenture is doing for the climate, what are the engagement that we take, and what are the actions. So this is a quick presentation, and I'm looking forward for your questions after. So the first thing is what the Accenture is. Like, Accenture is a very big company when you think about it. It's like 721,000 employees around the world, which is a very big number if you think about it. So we have as this a huge responsibility for all these employees. And we have around 9,000 clients. So we have the scope on which we are playing is very big. And so the commitment that we are taking have huge impact. So the first thing that we think at Accenture is sustainability is something that can make a force for change for our clients and for ourselves. So this is something that now today is very impregnated in our philosophy. So this is Julie Sweet, which is our CEO, and she redefined the way we are thinking. And this is the framework that we introduced, the 360-degree value. And you can see like it's a very basic kind of consulting framework. But one thing that's very important in this framework is the sustainability part. So it's one of our kind of pillar about thinking about when we think about what we are doing internally, and when we go to clients, this is one pillar that we want to address every time that we have a client meeting. So it's very important for us to address this topic. And this is a bit of like our annual report. So to show you what kind of commitment that we have taken. So we taken the pledge for the 1.5 degree mitigation. We took the science-based target by 2025. We want to be net zero emission by 2025 too. And we are also very transparent on our progress. And I think this is something very important, so not only to take a commitment, but to be transparent of what we have been doing and where we are today. And as you can see, also, we have some kind of supplier diversity. We're trying to include our suppliers. And as you know, for the SDG week, it's not about only the climate, but also about the social impact that we can have. So it's also something very important for us to take care of these things. Also, like, as I was mentioning, we care a lot about gender equality and race and ethnicity in the different countries that we operate in. And as you can see, we have a commitment of achieving 50% gender equality. And by last year, we were at 46%, which is a huge number for us. And we did a lot of effort to achieve this number. And also, as I was saying, for the Accenture, we have this report around the SDG. We focus on some of them, but we also take other ones like on water scarcity or like on the good health of our employees. So this is to show you that we are not only talking about sustainability, but also on the whole spectrum. So this is our commitment at Accenture, is really to try to tackle all of these challenges together, which is not easy, but we try to do it for our own in the first place. So what is the most important commitment here? And this discussion is around the net zero emission by 2025. And we want to achieve this on the three scopes, the scope 1, 2, and 3. And as you know, the scope 3 is the most difficult one, and I'm going to come back to that. And to do that, we have two big levers. The first one is carbon reduction, and the second one is removal to achieve this carbon neutrality. So what have we been doing in this carbon neutrality? The first thing is to have, which is very common now, to have the 100% renewable electricity. And by doing how to do this is very simple, is to to have contracts with a grid operator, with utility, and to purchase the green electricity. And we're doing this globally. And when you think about Accenture globally, which is present in 100 countries, this is not an easy task. And we are happy to see that last year we are already at 85% of renewable electricity on all of our operations. The second thing is when you think about consulting, Accenture, traveling is a big part of what we are doing. And the thing, how we think about is not having constraint, is trying to make people aware of what they are doing. So the third thing we have is like an aviation carbon calculator. So per employee, we can see how much you're consuming in terms of carbon. For example, I had this experience like 2 weeks ago. I was going to Amsterdam, and when I try to do this, I have like a pop-up saying you should take the high-speed train and not the flight. But it's something that can seem obvious, but to have this kind of reminders for everyone, like take the train and not the flight, this is something that we pushed forward. And of course, since COVID, we're pushing a lot for the kind of using the technology to make the meetings remote as much as possible. It's also something to make our clients aware of, because sometimes it's not depending on us, it depends a lot on our clients. So if our clients want us to be on site, we need to be to have this measure clear for them to know that we can do it on Zoom and whatever. And the third thing, the third pillar, which is the most complicated one, is around the scope 3 and how to engage the different suppliers. So our goal is to have 90% of our key suppliers, so not the bigger one, to take some pledges around the climate change. So we not want them to be carbon neutral because we cannot take action for them, but we want them to commit, to have a level of commitment and to be on our digital platform. So we deployed a kind of digital platform for our suppliers to show us their commitment, and we are pushing them to transform. So this is something to make our suppliers aware of the challenges that we are facing and that we want them to transform. So this is something very important, and we are trying in this scope, which is not easy, but we're trying. And by saying this, when we cannot reduce our consumption, what we can do is remove the carbon. So we have a lot of initiatives trying to help carbon removal where we can. So I gave here some examples like having planting bamboos in the Philippines or like reforestation in the US. So really trying to remove as much carbon as we can if you cannot. And we have some kind of metrics that are very specific here, and we are going to report on them. So this is how at Accenture we want to address the sustainability question. And I think one thing is very important is transparency. So this is, you can find on internet about Accenture as a public company, and you can find all this number about our scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, how much you can emit, like, and you can see that air travel is one big part of our carbon emissions. So we are very transparent of what we are doing, how we can do it. You have our energy usage, how are we, the carbon emission from the purchased goods and services. So I think we apply what we want from our clients ourselves in the first place. And I think it's the first step is to know, because when I can see in a lot of my clients, they don't know how much they emit in scope 1, 2, or 3. And data is a very powerful tool here. And by knowing what we are doing, it's much easier to try than to reduce our emissions. And of course, as a consulting company, we have a lot of sustainability services, and we want to push today sustainability in every project that we have. So like, this is very kind of summary, but what we are doing for our clients in terms of projects, but like sustainability strategy, net zero transition, value chain, we put sustainability everywhere, but it's very important for us to insist on this. And also where we see it's very important is the leadership and organization to make aware of all the kind of decision maker of how they can help in this fight for the climate change. And what we think also is sustainability by design. This is something that we are pushing, is to really think about sustainability in the beginning of the process, rather than at the end when the emission have already happened. So it's very important to act now. So we are putting a lot of pressure on this for our customers and clients. And what we're also doing, Accenture have a lot of partnership. We're also a partner of this SDG week, but we have been in partnership with the UN, the United Nations, and the World Economic Forum for the past years. And we've been helping the UN in drafting all the SDG goals, and we've been like a kind of pioneer in their SDG ambition. So it's a way for us also to help the community around us to be more aware of what we are doing, the sustainability, and how we can achieve this goal. And in the case of the World Economic Forum, we are helping them in different sub-forums that we are animating to show them how we can use the sustainability, and especially we have a focus on circular economy for the World Economic Forum. So this is all the work that we have been doing at Accenture to help fight the climate change. So this is my quick presentation, and I'm happy to take questions after.
Thank you, Laurent. And just a reminder to folks online as well. We see some of the questions coming in, but keep them up. We'll try to answer them later on. And now we're going to have Anessa from Dassault System. Actually, Anessa was here in one of our executive education programs. So yeah. Welcome back. Many of you know Dassault System because they were a partner, and they still are a partner with one of the largest, actually both the largest aircraft makers in the world, and providing a lot of the software service. And recently they launched, part of the reason I invited Vanessa here is because they're also working around the digital twin, so try to help measure and mitigate the carbon emission among many other sustainability goals. So there we go.
Absolutely, thank you. So just to start and to complete what you just said, I thought maybe it would be a good idea to share the different states or stages of our history and about who we are and what we do at Dassault System. So actually, we've been created in 1981, so where we launched the first version of CATIA, so maybe a name that you know, to do 3D modeling and represent the surface of product. And quickly, actually, we went one step forward by developing in 1989 the first digital mock-up of an entire airplane with one of the partners that you mentioned. And the goal was not only to design the outside, but also the inside, and to be able, from the first time, to build an entire physical mock-up that could fly and not create or rely only on physical prototype. Then in 1999, we were in the era of product lifecycle management, meaning that we were managing all the product data from the ideation phase to the end of life of the product, including the design phase, the manufacturing phase, etc. And managing all that to collect all the information to be able to improve the other version of products. And in 2012, so we introduced the 3D Experience platform. So what does it mean? It means that we combine around one single platform with one single user interface and data model, all our different products to do 3D modeling, simulation, factory simulation, data management, information intelligence, to collect all the data all around one platform, so to be able to manage all information about product design. And we were able to do that at the product scale, but also at the molecular scale and at the city scale. So we were able, for example, to model the entire city of Singapore and simulate the different flows that could happen within a city. And in 2020, we imagined that we could be able actually to design the virtual twin experience of humans. We were able to do that for a product, for a city, so why not the humans? So we started to do that. We started to build the virtual twin of the human heart. So now surgeons are able to train, to learn from their patient around the virtual model before doing it in the real world. So this is where we are today. And that led us to become the world leader in 3D design and engineering software. So we are much less than Accenture, but we are a little bit more than 20,000 around the world. And we like to say that we are a future-facing company. we are actually a science-based company, and we rely a lot on scientific algorithms, science, and as you can see, we have more than 40% today of our employees that are working within R&D in our research and development department. And well, there is a lot of investment that are done in research. So, long story short, Dassault Systèmes, what is our purpose? So it is to provide to our customers, so business and people, 3D experience universes or virtual twin experiences to imagine sustainable innovation capable of harmonizing product, nature, and life. Product, nature, you remember the cities and what is around us, and life, the human body. So this is the 3 sectors that we want to work on and to be able to harmonize all this together in one single environment. So now what are we doing in terms of sustainability? So we built our sustainability compass that guide us in everything that we do. And we built this compass around 3 pillars. So the first one, it's not, we cannot see it, but it's experience the change ourselves. So how we embed actually sustainability in everything that we do at the company level. So first, we set our environmental target or CO2 emission reduction targets that have been validated by the SBTi, Science-Based Target Initiative, in 2021. So we first set our baseline in 2019, so we know how we can measure and what kind of a number we can reach. And our goal is to reach carbon neutrality by 2040. As you know, we are relying a lot on infrastructure like data center, etc. So this is why we have to work with our partners in order to reach this carbon neutrality. And the second pillar is harmonize our portfolio. So as I explained, we are building software in order to virtualize what is around us. What we want to do is that by 2025, more than 2/3 of our revenue, of our solutions, will actually have a positive impact on sustainability, on the sustainability of the products that are created with those solutions. And we started by introducing in our platform in January this year, lifecycle assessment solution that will help to do eco-design or to see actually the impact of the development of a product right from its ideation or the design of the product. And to achieve those two objectives, we know that we cannot do that alone. So that's why we want also to collaborate with our different stakeholders, starting with our clients that help us also to define the right solutions, our suppliers, and also different organisms. 2 slides before, yeah, I saw some of our memberships, like for example, we are a member of Ellen MacArthur Foundation, part of the European Green Deal Coalition, etc. So this is important for us also to learn and to see how we can actually have an impact on the world. So virtual twins, what we mean exactly about virtual twins. So virtual twins is actually the modelization of a product or a city or a human that you can actually experience or experiment. You can test, you can visualize exactly what will be its behavior in the real world. And we have a high level of accuracy that help us to say, yes, what you are experimenting in the virtual world is exactly what will be in the real world, but it helps you to imagine any kind of scenarios. So you can test in different environments how the products will behave. And it avoids to do that with physical or real prototypes. And obviously it reduces the environmental impact. It helps to imagine all those kind of scenarios, but it helps also to accelerate the product development. And just 2 examples here. So we see kind of new technologies. So the electric vehicles and the wind turbine. So those new products or new technologies have been created quite fast I would say. It has been accelerated in the last years. And we know that all of them have been created with virtual twin solutions, and 85% of them have been created with the system technology for the case of electrical vehicle, and 75% of the wind turbines have been created also with our solutions. So how do we use actually the virtual twin capabilities to have an impact on sustainability? So here we see the different phases of the product lifecycle. If we start with research and development, actually within a virtual twin environment system platform, well, you can access all the data from previous projects, but also from new innovations that are coming up and that you want to use. And those data can be used to identify new type of scenario. So you will be able to model all those multiple scenarios right from the ideation phase. In the design and engineering, well, the most obvious one is the in silico prototyping and testing. You are simulating virtually your product, not anymore physically. So first you gain a lot of time. You don't wait to have the physical prototype to test your product before making the change and re-engineering everything. You do that right from the first, right from the design phase. And you are also able to have visibility on the sustainability impact of your product. So we have this lifecycle assessment product within the design tool. So that allows you, or allows the engineer to say, okay, if I select this type of material, this it will be this type of impact for my product. Or if I select this way of manufacturing my product, I know that it will have an impact. If I build a modular product, I know it will be in the future more reparable or more sustainable or more recyclable. So this is the kind of things we can design in the early phase. In the manufacturing side, so as I explained, so we can do a virtual twin of everything. So obviously also a factory. And in the factory part, we can imagine manufacturing processes and optimize them. We can simulate them, so we can optimize them. And it helps, for example, to reduce energy consumption during the manufacturing phase, or also to avoid too many scrap or waste that could be generating during the manufacturing phase. We have also solutions for transport and logistics, like algorithmic planning and route optimization that will be able to explain what kind of supplier you can choose for this creation of product. During the use phase of the product, where we have, for example, predictive maintenance capabilities, reusing data of the real world will help also to understand when you can change a part of your product or not. Today, just to explain, to see one example, you will maybe speak about data center in the future, but data center, you cannot have any downtime. It's very problematic when you have just 1 hour of downtime. So because of that, you want to maintain a high level of the rack or the servers that you have there. So because of that, because of this criteria and challenge related to the high level of work of your data center, you just throw away the servers after 2 or 3 years, even if they're working well. So if we monitor them correctly, or just reuse those servers for another type of usage, it will reduce the environmental impact of the data center. So this is things we can work with companies, and we started to do that with companies that are developing data center. And for the end of life, well, as I said at the beginning, from the design phase, you can imagine how you will recycle your product, how you will disassemble it, or just repair it. Fairphone have been developing those modular phone. It is obvious, but you don't have to throw your mobile phone away after 2 years. You can just change the module that is not working or that you want to be better, and you have a brand new usage. So in short, so to conclude, our conviction that we strongly believe at SDG System that virtual universes will be a key enabler for our clients, our customers, to imagine, design, and test radically new products, even materials or manufacturing processes. and it is important at the fastest possible speed. We are in the decade to deliver, so this is now that we have to accelerate the development phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Anissa. Wonderful. So now we've heard, we talk about the commitment from the company, and we heard from Anissa a little bit more around the product and how tech can help. Last but not least, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
So it's good to be back here. I was at my 30-year MBA reunion 1 month ago. I can already tell what you're thinking. First of all, he's really old. Second of all, do they really dance when they're that old? And the third one was, you probably didn't want to see it, right? So it's really nice to be back here, talking about something that I'm very passionate about, which is sustainability. My role as an industry executive, I get to go and talk to lots of large companies in the energy space and manufacturing space and logistics, and talk about transformation in general, but a lot of that is tied very closely to sustainability. There are lots of things that we could talk about. I think three of the ones that we're very much aware of is, one is it has to start with data. I completely agree with both of you and our keynote speaker this morning. Right? If we want to change behavior, we need to understand where we are today. If we set goals, we need to be able to monitor the progress towards those goals. So data is key. The second one is we're not going to be able to do this without a huge amount of innovation. And that's why I think tech players have such a big role to play. In some cases, we have some technology to be able to, or innovation, or the right tools to be able to reduce our energy consumption. I think most of you might have used Teams before, and that's certainly been a big help over the last few years. In some cases, there are some technologies that exist, but not at the scale that we would like. And in a lot of cases, they're not commercially available at the price point that we need. So, I'll talk a little bit about some of them. So that's the second thing. Innovation is super crucial, and we need to be part of the solution in helping create these new technologies that's going to get us to climate zero, to net zero. And then the third one is, I think those of us who can need to go further than net zero. We need to be not just climate neutral, we need to be net positive, right? So, and this is a big thing for Microsoft. We've made some pretty bold ambitions, maybe even bolder than you expect them to be. So let me get on to that. So one of the things that we do is we invite lots of customers to come in and talk about the Microsoft journey, because they're interested. We've actually been doing this sustainability stuff for a while, and they want to hear what is it that we've been doing. One of the interesting ones is very early on, we introduced this idea of an internal carbon tax, right? And the reason was we had business managers who were having to make decisions between, do I do the right thing financially, or do I do the right thing for a sustainability perspective? And so over 10 years ago, we introduced this carbon tax. And it says for every metric ton, you actually pay $15. It actually started off at $9. You pay $9 to the corporate fund, and we're going to use that to create a climate innovation fund. So we've actually launched something, a climate innovation fund. So it's $1 billion towards technologies, especially around carbon removal. So implementing the carbon tax, and so we did it initially for scope 1. In 2019, we almost doubled the carbon tax, because we didn't feel that it was driving behavior as much as we wanted to. I want to speak here, right? There we go. Okay. we weren't influencing behavior as much as we wanted to. And we also introduced it for scope 2. And then last year, we introduced it for scope 3. Now, that's a big change, as you'll see how big the numbers are. So that was that's one of the things that we talk about. We've developed lots of tools on the way that that we use internally that customers are really interested in. So, you know, we want to run all our data centers on renewable energy all the time. So one of the questions that we got from customers was, how do you know that the energy that you're using in the middle of the night when the wind's not blowing was actually renewable? Because the way it works is in the past, you actually created this certificate of origin on a yearly basis and said, okay, we've created all this energy and some of it's renewable and we'll send you some of that stuff. And it's like, in God we trust, all others must bring data. So we said, okay, how do we create this, a system that actually does these certificates of origin on an hourly basis? I want to know where those electrons came from, not in general. So we built something together with Vattenfall. So that was another tool. You talked a little bit about sustainability centers. We've actually created a circularity center directly to address the problem that you're talking about. Servers become not good enough for data centers, but we want to reuse them. And so we've built an AI system that tells us which components are reusable, which ones are not. And then we had to change our supply chain processes, right? Because supply chain processes, you take lots of little bits, you assemble them, and then you sell them. Well, this is a reverse system. You take a big thing and you break it down in small bits, and then you either sell them on or reuse them. So we had to reinvent lots of business processes, and other people were interested in that. So this is, there's another thing that we talked about. And then 2 years ago, we made 3 really bold ambitions, right? So one is, we're going to become carbon negative by 2030. And yes, it includes scope 3. And we'll talk a little bit about that because, you know, the scope 3 thing makes it, you know, it just takes it to a completely different level. The second thing is this investment in the Climate Innovation Fund, $1 billion towards startups working for creating these new technologies. And then the third one is by 2050, we want to have wiped out our carbon footprint historically, right? So since the beginning of Microsoft, we've been emitting. That was 40 years ago. By 2050, we will have removed all the carbon that we have historically produced, right? So those are pretty big, bold ambitions. I think we all recognize that it's easy to make ambitions and set goals. So how well are we doing against that? And this is one page out of 129-page sustainability report that tracks the progress of how we're doing. I think each one of those pages links to a couple of other articles. So if you want to read it all, it's a couple of thousand pages. I'm going to pull out just a couple of numbers here. And one of them, first one is the carbon removal one. Because in addition to kind of solving our own problems, we're trying to make sure that one, we're helping to create marketplaces. And the second thing is that we share learnings about everything that we do. So 2 years ago, we went out and tried to buy 1.3, or actually 1 million tons of carbon removal, right? This isn't carbon offsets. This isn't, you know, please, you know, avoid things that you were going to do before. This is actually taking carbon out of the atmosphere. So we did, we got 139 responses to an RFP. We actually ended up buying from 15, right? It's the biggest, it was the biggest purchase of carbon removal at the time. There are lots of problems around carbon removal market today. You know, if you talk about forestation, it's great. Would you have planted that forest anyway? Right? How long is it going to last? How do you make sure that that it isn't being used for something else? What happens if there's a wildfire? Lots of issues around it. And that's just for the nature-based ones. If we take a look at some of the other things, carbon capture and storage, or direct air capture, so these big fans that that sit on mountaintops and suck carbon out of the air and then mineralize it, kind of pushing it down into rock formations under the ground. So we ended up buying 1.3 million tons 2 years ago. We bought 1.5 million last year. But one of the things that we learned is this market needs to grow enormously. You know, we expect by 2050, the industry says we are going to need to buy 10 gigatons of carbon removal. We will not get to our climate targets without significant carbon removal. So this is a really big one. We talked a little bit about kind of why we don't see, you know, this big spike of tech players being, you know, big energy, you know, bad on the energy scale. Let's put it that way. And one of the reasons is, if you look at the top buyers of renewable energy, you'll see Microsoft and Amazon and Google. We're usually kind of 1, 2, and 3 in most of these areas. So we've bought 6 gigawatts of renewable energy over the last few years. It's a bit more than that by now. That's big. We are usually number 1 or 2 in terms of buying renewable energy, and we're using that for our data centers. We're using that to run more and more of our operations. By 2025, 100% of our operations will run on renewable energy. And then I talked about circularity centers. And coming back to your point about scope 3 emissions, this is the big problem, right? So if we take a look at scope 1, 2, and 3, we emit 116,000 tons of CO2 in scope 1, 140,000 in scope 2, and 14 million in scope 3. Right? So it's not, you know, it's an order of magnitude. It's a huge difference. So when we talk about implementing carbon tax for scope 3, you know, you can imagine people getting nervous. When we say we're going to be carbon negative by 2030, it includes scope 3. And in order to do that, we're doing 2 things. One is we're taking scope 3 and we're committing to cut that in half by 2030, right? So from 14 million tons down to 7. And the second thing is we're going to buy enough carbon removal to offset that and more, right? So over 7 million tons we need to buy. And you can take a look at the big drivers behind these scope 3 emissions, right? There are 3 really big ones. One is the things that we purchase, right? So all the raw materials that we need to make surfaces and Xboxes and data centers and so on. The second one is the buildings themselves, right? So if we're buying big, you know, if we're creating big data centers, there's lots of carbon and steel and so on that goes into them. And those are big problems that we haven't solved yet. We're doing lots of research on things like cement that actually absorbs carbon instead of emitting. So that's the second biggest one. And then the third biggest one is you guys, anyone who plays on the Xbox, right? How are you powering that? And that's different in every country, right? So we're actually taking a look at the downstream use of who's using our products, whether it's Surface laptops or Xboxes or whatever, and saying that's part of our responsibility as well. So this is the hard part. This is also why sustainability is such a team sport, right? We can do whatever we like. We can get rid of, scope 1, scope 2. We can do it like that, right? Scope 3 is the difficult one. Scope 3 is the one that everyone needs to address, which means that we need to work with our suppliers and partners, right? Anything that we can do to help cement companies reduce their carbon emissions, or steel, or transport, it means it's reducing our scope 3, it's helping them, but it's also helping all their other customers reduce their scope 3 emissions. So this is where we're going to have the biggest impact working with customers. And we do that in lots of different industries where, we work across many different industries. Here's some of the things that we're doing. We're helping companies measure how well coolers are doing in supermarkets, right? To make sure that people haven't left the door open or they're not working properly. We're helping in terms of agriculture. We're providing forecasts about, hey, you're about to go out and irrigate your plants. Do you know it's going to rain in an hour? You may not need to do that. Or, what is the best time to harvest? Or there are many things that we're doing. We're doing things. We're working with. I was involved in a project where we're looking at an AI model to help wind turbine companies figure out how to get the most out of wind farms. So you can imagine, here's my wind turbine. I want it facing the wind to get the most out, right? Unfortunately, the one behind gets a lot of turbulence, so it gets less wind. So this idea was, how do we create not a greedy algorithm for each of the turbines, but actually a team player algorithm so that you get the most out of the complete wind farm? Many, many different projects in here. I could go on for hours, but then you might feel as old as I am already. So maybe we should move to the panel discussion.
Thank you so much,
Thanks a
Andrew.
lot.
Okay, let me invite all the panelists back, and I'll have them sit down. I have a little bit of power standing here. Make me feel a little bit more powerful. Instead of me asking questions, let me open it up, since you've been patiently sitting there for about an hour. Any questions from the audience, or while I read the teleprompter? Any questions from the website? No website, no WebEx. Yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. I have a question regarding the. Hello.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you for the opportunity. I have a question regarding the offsetting strategy. How do you guys usually go about that? Do you offset with the spot credits, or do you project your emission in the future and you kind of do offtake agreements, or how does that work? Thank you.
So I guess there are two things. First of all, I think there are two things. One is more carbon offsetting, and then the other one, or with let's say arrangements with other companies that agree not to produce as much carbon as they would otherwise, right? So I don't know if many of you know, but this is a big source of revenue for Tesla, right? They actually sell their carbon emissions options to other car companies so that the other ones don't emit as much. We're trying to take very much more of a carbon removal approach. So yes, we predict out. We have a reasonable idea of how much our carbon emissions are going to be over the next years. We have some setbacks, and if you read our sustainability report last year, our scope 3 emissions went up, right? In spite all of our efforts, and it's partly because our business is growing, or we're building more data centers and so on. But in general, we have a pretty good idea of how much carbon we're going to emit. So we go out and actively try and buy the carbon removal in order to match that, or slowly reduce that down until 2030 when, D-Day, right? We've got to be negative.
I mean, similarly, I think Old has a question from online, basically asking you what's the share or the balance between removal and reduction, if you know it for your organization across the different scopes.
I don't have the exact number. I know that this is something that we plan to achieve our net zero. We won't be positive. Yes, positive in terms of climate by 2040 ourselves. So that's why we plan to also work with partners that will use also our solutions to create this carbon removal technologies. So I don't have the number on my side, but this is something we're working on.
I think, yeah, for us, like the scope 3, which is the hardest one, the removal is really the way to go. So like, yeah, it's not offsetting, it's really removing the carbon that we cannot do it our own.
I would say the same, right? So the removal is the really big bucket. There are areas of the business. I'll give one example. In a data center, we have something called PUE, which is basically power effectiveness in a data center. It used to be 3. That means that for every unit of energy that was used for compute, we used 2 units to heat and cool and do all the rest of the stuff. We're down to 1.18 right now, right? So that's a huge reduction in terms of or improving efficiency. But the really big chunk, as you saw, is not scope 1 and scope 2, it's scope 3. And there, the only thing that you can do is work with your suppliers or remove.
And that's what we see across by different measures. Again, it's not all sectors, but if you look at the productivity of technology, it does reduce the carbon emission and energy consumption over time, which is sort of the good news of where we're heading right now. Let's take another one from the audience. Yes, please, yeah.
Hello, this is John Lammers, MBA student. Thanks for those contributions. Very interesting to start off with. I'm wondering, perhaps a challenge to all 3 speakers, how the ambitions you outlined translate into your client or customer selection policies. So for instance, in particular, if we talk about scope 3, there's kind of 2 archetypes, of course, you can take. So I'm wondering where you fall on the divide between saying either we're kind of going to work in particular with the clients and customers where that are kind of the most dirty right now, because that's where the changes need to be made. Or indeed, it's like the kind of preaching to the choir approach of radically reducing your scope 3 is actually saying we're only going to work with clients that are kind of aligned with these kind of views. So for instance, only offering Azure to the clients that have SBTI goals already formulated. So I'm wondering where each of you would fall on that divide.
Let me also work in Daniel's question, which is along the same line from online and basically talking about, so she referred to the IFRS and the ISSB standard basically includes scope 3. So how do you think about your ability to actually do this or select your customers or suppliers in the broader ecosystem?
I can start. Like the first thing is for us to help our suppliers. So it's not like we think it's better like to help our suppliers move into a more sustainable way of working. So sometimes, and as you were saying also, we cannot choose all of our suppliers to be carbon neutral. Sometimes we don't have a choice. Like if we're speaking about a cement company, we don't have many other choices. So we're really trying with the platform that we're making is really to try to make them aware that it's something that we need. Maybe the future is going to be a requirement, but today it's something that we are trying more to work with them and help them achieve the goals. So I think this is the first step. Excluding is very, like, I don't see it as steps very radical for now, for me. So I think it's a second step, but really to try to help the suppliers, yeah.
If I may quickly follow up, like I get how that works for the upstream part of your value chain. You have a lot more freedom to choose in your downstream part. So I'm wondering how that plays into that, and if you select clients based on these metrics.
I mean, you're right. Like, for example, we have a lot of oil and company gas clients that we have, and we still choose to work with them. And I think I mean, like the policy is not to exclude this kind of clients to work with them. We have a lot of projects that we want to pursue with them. And as I was saying in the beginning, we have 6 pillars. And one of them is sustainability. So when we go see our clients, even we still do the job with them on their oil and gas, we still have this kind of what I say presentation, or like making them aware of what is happening and try to push our agenda around sustainability, because it's also part of our scope 3. So the way that we're tackling it, this is making them aware, working with them, how we can help them. And we have a lot of projects with this kind of clients, like for the oil and company. I think we are helping some of the big ones making shifts. For example, we worked with the Volkswagen launching their electric mobility part. So it's not something, okay, we're not going to work with a diesel company. We're going to help them launch a new electric mobility segment. So it's really working with them on new agendas to help them. So as we were saying, scope 3 is really a teamwork. So how can we really make it a team effort?
So yeah, maybe just some number at Desto System, we decided also to set some objectives, and we have the goal to have more than 52% of our suppliers that will have set targets, carbon emission targets at the SBTi level. So we want also to work more with suppliers that will have this kind of targets to reduce the global warming of the planet. We are not yet reaching the 100% because it will take time for sure, but at least we support also our suppliers to reach this level. And in terms of clients, well, actually we have a sustainability policy and we are changing, and we are also selecting some customers that we don't want to work anymore. So it's not an easy decision. But I think this is also where we want to position our solutions, because we think that there are innovative solutions that can help, and we want to also to help the new technologies and not the old one.
Maybe on this one, let's bring in the public sector as well, right? So I always like this question because we did a poll. We asked people whose responsibility is it? Is it large corporation like yours? Is it public sector? Is it the consumers, etc.? There are a broader discussion around sustainability, basically on the supplier side, this emission reports at least, or sort of acceptable target would become a license to operate. And then on the sort of the customer side, and there could also be sort of a conversation around which customer you should work with because of public pressure or social media conversation, etc. Curious about your take on this. Should large organizations wait or influence through policy making, or should you actually take a lead and say, this is our policy in spite of what's happening with the public sector, what for example, EU was saying, or UK was saying, or US? Well, yeah.
I think, you know, our policy is very clear. We want to provide the tools for everyone to make strides in this area. I think some companies have shied away, especially in terms of oil and gas. I think, you know, we see them as a critical part of the energy transition. First of all, it's an energy transition, right? We're not flicking a switch and saying, tomorrow we're going to switch off oil and gas. You know, we'd all freeze, right? And we wouldn't have plastics. And there are many reasons that that we need to make this a phasing process. The other thing that, you know, that we have to recognize is, if you take a look at investment in renewables, the biggest investments are coming from those oil and gas companies, right? So if we want to get to, you know, tens of gigawatts, hundreds of gigawatts of wind power, you know, the ones who are driving the biggest investments in those areas are the BPs and Shells and Equinors and Repsols and so on. So not working with them would, I think, slow down our transition to renewable.
Thanks.
Good. Are there other questions? Yes, please, Vince.
Sorry, the other one doesn't work. Very, you know, down to earth. Most of us are studying here. What can we do next year? You know, what kind of jobs do you offer? What's the contribution at MBA future workers can actually have, considering we, sorry, assuming we don't already have like tech backgrounds, for example.
Right, so how can a student participate both from a career point of view and from sort of the tech?
Yeah, student and future
Leaders.
Yeah.
I can, yeah. I mean, like the first thing.
Just right on time when I said.
I mean, we are recruiting kind of very large kind of background, so you don't need to have a tech background to join Accenture. There's a lot of opportunities. It's a big company, but like the consulting part, you don't need to have a tech background. And at Accenture, we just launched like a few months ago a sustainability dedicated practice. So before, the sustainability was in every practice, and now we have a dedicated kind of global team that's really doing only like sustainability kind of work. So you have this new kind of practice that you can join and contribute. So this is to do work like zero transition, like sustainability value chain, this kind of work with clients globally. And also at Accenture, especially like here in France, we have what we call foundations, like working with kind of NGOs like La Fresque du Climat, this kind of NGOs, like, and to help people be more aware of the climate change and work like really to make an impact, not only for us, but also for society as a whole. So yeah, there's many opportunities at Accenture if you want to join.
How do you join Microsoft? Or go ahead.
Good. So, so I guess two things. First of all, there are lots of roles within Microsoft that are not technically oriented. You know, lots of sales and business development role. We're trying to hire more and more from people with industry backgrounds as well. But the other thing, you know, the other big shift that we're seeing is kind of this paradigm shift towards something called low code development, right? So if you want to create tools that that contribute to sustainability discussions, it doesn't mean you have to have, you don't have to be a developer. Think about tools that are kind of the child of Excel plus PowerPoint, which you're both pretty good at. You have these low-code platforms that are starting to really permeate throughout the industry, especially in the energy industry, where it's giving people with real subject matter expertise the ability to make a difference, to create tools for themselves to be able to operate more effectively, efficiently, safely, and so on. So I think the future of tech is not so much, you know, and I've got to get into hardline coding. It's much more about how do I translate business goals into products with tools that are going to be much, much easier to use.
So yes, at the system, we are also hiring. There is many opportunities open that are available on our website if you want to have a look. But in terms of sustainability, well, we have a team dedicated to sustainability within the system that is composed of many different types of people in terms of background, but yeah, in terms of background. So there, we have this team, and we also, in each department, we want to have what we call a sustainability lead, someone who speaks for the sustainability within the company. The goal is to really have that in mind in everything that we do. And we have actually internally a kind of a Leap for Sustainability program that is launched at the company level, and any employee can propose a solution or a new technology or whatever to solve a sustainability problem. So we launched that last year, and we have the same kind of programs this year. And actually last year it was very interesting because we actually, the team who won actually built an entire solution that we are now proposing to our customers. And this year we also launched the climate fresk, so every employee are able to follow this climate fresk, and it's kind of an open eye session, and where people don't always realize what is the impact of one action, and also how we can act to actually have a positive impact around that. So this is what we do.
Excellent. So for all of you, there's another big piece for sustainability is your personal drive, right? So basically, how do you take that into the work? And we see the panelists, and the reason they are here and they're invited also because they take the sustainability as their own passion and purpose within the work. Now let's turn it to the organizers. Are there any questions from the previous polls from the students? Let's take a couple.
Yeah, so an interesting question we had was, well, how do you actually find yourself selling some of the technology solutions that you develop? Is it the immediate cost reductions that the clients are looking for? Is it compliance to the new regulations? Is it long-term cost reductions? What are some of the key elements that you find clients really looking for?
I think for us, one of the things that we see is that in general, good for sustainability usually also means good for business, right? What does that mean? If you build a circularity center, it means that you're able to reuse products more, buying less raw materials, etc. If you want to reduce the operating energy or the energy that you use to run your manufacturing environment, that means that you're looking for inefficiencies. You're looking for IoT signals, for example, that tells you that this pump is running ineffectively. If you fix that, you'll spend less on energy and you'll probably have less downtime as well. So I don't think, I think in the past people have automatically assumed that more sustainable means higher cost or lower revenue. And I think we're finding more and more that that's not the case. And I think one more step is the one that you talked about a little bit on the public sector and the customers. If you don't have a strong sustainability kind of image out there, you're going to find, first of all, your investors are going to start making noises, moving away, increasing your cost of capital and so on. And the second thing is you may find some customers moving away from you. So there is a short-term effect. A little bit depends on the maturity of the company. Some of them are saying, I need to comply, but most of the companies that we work with take a longer view that says, hey, it could be good for business. It's certainly good for our image, and it should drive top line, bottom line growth.
Yeah, I think another common one was also, so you spoke about how, there's scope for reductions in the products that you make. And I know that, well, two of our panelists don't necessarily make hardware products, but then the question would be, how do you tackle the problem of e-waste and the fact that some of the products or the hardware that you do make is not yet, let's say, as part of a circular economy, it's not reusable. So how are you working on that?
So, and I think you have some ideas behind it.
So even if we don't do hardware, we do work with companies who create, with a lot of hardware, and especially, well, I'm working with the high-tech industry. So a lot of companies that create actually e-waste. And the good thing is that we see from our customers, but also from Europe, for example, programs that are developed to reduce this number of e-wastes. And it starts by managing the existing e-waste, but also how to create products that in the future won't generate that 57 megatons of e-waste in the future. So virtual twin actually is of our product is actually a good solution for that, because you can imagine new type of technologies. You can imagine how you can extend the life of the product and yes, change the cycle of the product usage. And companies like, for example, the big mobile phone manufacturers, etc., are really thinking about that and changing the way of developing their product to reduce this e-waste. And electronic is not only at the OEM level, but also at, for example, the semiconductor level or electronic PCB level. There is a big trend around that today, and it's moving fast. And yeah, it's positive.
That's where we see a lot of this technology evolution over the time as well, right? So for the sector, one of the big thing is before you can actually got the raw material through the supply chain and make all these products. And now because the waste, the cost of processing the waste and also the lack of access to the material, the cost is sort of balancing out, right? So now more companies thinking about sustainability not only as a sustainability issue, but also a supply chain security issue. So then it becomes quite interesting on your balance sheet.
And I mean, you'll see the first completely recycled material Xbox coming out soon, or controller and so on. We're taking some of the learnings from our circular centers, where we're taking servers that used to be in the data center and disassembling them and saying, hey, it's really hard to disassemble this. Maybe we need to design it a little bit differently. So there's a nice feedback loop there where we're learning from our own experiences of circularity centers, of reuse. We recognize that more and more consumers, more and more buyers of our products are going to want that. So there's a lot of pressure on us to move in that direction as well, and we're making good progress.
I had a very good example on this, how to manage the waste. So we had this project with a global equipment retailer in Europe, and as they did everything having recycled material. So that was okay. We did this. We have a renewable energy. What we can do next? And one of the ideas that we had and we put for them is having now how we can have sustainability by design, designing your products to be with a higher lifetime. And also one of the recommendation was to have having repair centers. And for example, when we say recycling, that means that the product is not available anymore. And we think about repairing the products. So this is something that increase the lifetime of the product, that reduce the carbon emission because they're not buying a new product. And also, which is very important, it's a new revenue stream for them. So if you take this together, you can really help out your customer managing the waste before it becomes the product becomes a waste.
Great. So we're coming to the end of the section, and it's great to have this conversation. I'm going to leave the last words to each of the panelists. I'm going to ask you two questions, merging some of the questions we actually collected here and one that I would like to add. So the first one is many asking, we've heard a lot about different technologies, from virtual twins to carbon fixation and to AI to everything else. Which one you predict is going to be one of the biggest impact in sustainability? That's a really hard question, so I really like it. And then the second one would be coming back to sort of Vincent's question. What's the call for action for business or for the future leaders that are sitting either in a room or on the through the WebEx, and how do we actually participate in this in a meaningful fashion? So who wants to start?
I can maybe start. Well, for the first question, we have a direct answer. I think, yeah, with virtual twin, obviously. But with virtual twin experience includes actually IoT, AI, because when we speak about a twin, it means that we have a real twin and we have to collect also all the data and take advantage of those data, because this will improve the future experience of the product. So it's a mix of the two, I would say. And then about the call to action, I think it's within our company, but it's within most of our clients and other companies, is to have sustainability at the heart of everything that we do. As I said, we are in the decade to deliver. We don't have time, so we have to act now. And we have, fortunately, goals. We have set our goals, but we have also technologies that can help us to reach our targets. And so keep sustainability in what you you do. And in any case, we are really looking for people who have this knowledge within our company.
Okay. For the first question, I think today the pace that we set is still low. So I don't think one technology, but I think we still need a lot of innovation. So like my first thing is we need still innovation, AI, on machine learning, on clouds, on everything. And because still the pace that we have been taking is not fast enough. So I think I don't see one technology, but I think that we need every one of us and you to do more innovation, to find new solutions, because we really need it to achieve the goals. And so my call of action is like, yeah, sustainability is the heart of everything. Like here at INSEAD, you're a student, but when you go home, like in your real life, and when you're going to work, like when you're traveling, have this kind of mindset that it's a responsibility of everyone. As we said, like a lot of times it's a teamwork. So if you only think about it when you're working, then you're missing a big part. So yeah, sustainability in every step that you take.
I'm going to cheat on the first one. And I will say I think there are two really big innovations or technology advances that we need to make. On the physical side, I do think the carbon removal plays a really important part, and not just nature-based ones, but some of the more permanent ones. But I would say on the digital side, getting to proper data around emissions and goals and consistent reporting, consistent way of ontology. So, if I called something this, you and I both agree on what that is. If you're starting to take a look at scope 3 emissions and you start to trade data, you recognize that everyone calls something a little bit differently. And until we get to a common understanding of what things are, unless we get to a baseline where we understand and we're really honest with ourselves, what's our emissions today, then all the goals that we set, we can't measure progress against it. We can't, there's no way for legislation to come in and reward the people who are making progress or not reward the people who are not making progress. So I think the data side is super crucial. In terms of what you guys can do, you are the generation that needs to come in and challenge us, right? There are a bunch of old people like me saying, "Oh, we tried that before, and it doesn't work that way," and so on. You don't come in with that, right? You come in with this way of challenging things, and we were having this discussion before, weren't we? I think you guys, more than anyone, are going to push the companies from inside to say, we need to do more. And I think I really hope, and I'm confident that this new generation of leaders that you guys represent, you're going to push us much harder than the incumbents will, than the status quo. That's my hope and dream. That's why I'm here.
On that happy note, I hope you take a lot of examples from today's conversation. And what I take away is very much what we're saying is technology has this very intimate relationship with sustainability. It's not adding the cost, but it actually can be a longer term performance and success for the company. And you need to pay attention to innovation. And for all of you, really, this is your future, right? So pay attention, make the call to action, and take action today. So with that, let's please join me and then thank the panelists again. And thank you all for coming. Enjoy SDG Week.